across a minefield. A sudden explosion. My husband, Colonel Jabari Thorne, gave the last dose of epinephrine to his old flame, Imani Vance. I laughed and asked him, if I died, would he regret it? He hesitated for a second. Then he carried Imani into the ambulance, saying my injuries were minor and that he'd be right back. 3 days later, he rushed into the hospital ward. The doctor said, she passed away that same day. This was all that was in her personal effects. When the explosion hit, only one last dose of epinephrine was left on site. The medic, Keisha, knelt beside me, unable to find my carotid artery, her hands scrambling for the drug in the med kit. But my husband, Jabari, was a step faster. He snatched the syringe and sprinted towards Imani Vance, who was a dozen yards away. Imani can't breathe. She has a history of severe allergies, Keisha yelled as a reminder. Colonel Thorne, Zora's in shock. Jabari didn't seem to hear. He ripped open Imani's sleeve, jabbed the needle straight into her arm, and then bent down to lift her. I lay in the rubble and blood, staring at the smoke-stained insignia on his chest, and a sudden smile crossed my face. Jabari Thorne. He stopped in his tracks. I asked, if I died, would you regret it? He looked down at me. The moment was brief, but it was long enough for me to see his hesitation clearly. Then, he tightened his hold on Imani and turned towards the first ambulance. Your injuries are minor. Wait for me. I'll be back. Before the ambulance doors closed, Imani leaned against his chest, looking at me through the smoke. Her breathing had already stabilized, but her right hand was still clutching Jabari's collar, as if holding on to something she'd waited 10 years for. After the vehicle left, the scene fell silent for a moment. The next second, screams filled my ears again. Zora's got no blood pressure. Open wound to the abdomen. Prep for chest compressions. I looked down at myself. The outer layer of my protective suit only had a few tears, and there wasn't even much blood visible on my stomach. No wonder Jabari thought I was only lightly injured. But I knew better than anyone that with blast wave injuries, the visible tears on the skin are never the most dangerous part. I could feel the blood pooling in my abdominal cavity. Every breath felt like someone was carving out my lungs with a dull knife. The medic, Keisha, knelt beside me, her hands pressed against my wound, her eyes red. Zora, don't you fall asleep on me. I tried to lift my left hand. The wedding ring on my fourth finger was scorching hot from the blast, the band deformed and stuck on my knuckle. I gritted my teeth and slowly worked it off. The skin tore, and blood dripped from my fingertip onto the ring. Inside the band were the words Jabari himself had chosen years ago. Stand together, never forsaken. I stared at it for 2 seconds, then stuffed it into the metal data box on my chest. That box was the battlefield biomonitoring device I had designed myself. It stored the offline records from 24 hours before and after the incident. Route risks, personnel location, vital signs, on-site audio, and every single manual override log. Imani had asked me for deletion access multiple times, but I had refused. Half an hour before the explosion, I had even received an unusual alert. Someone, using her account, had changed the risk level of the path we were on from red to yellow. I was about to find Jabari right then, but he was standing next to Imani, presenting the battlefield triage system he was leading to a group of inspectors. The core algorithm for that system was mine, but my name wasn't on the author list. I said to Keisha, press the black button on the side of the box. Zora. Keisha's hand trembled as she pressed it. The indicator light flashed 3 times. My algorithm license, medical proxy rights, and remote data access were all frozen simultaneously. Within 24 hours, if I didn't personally lift the freeze, all temporary authorizations would automatically terminate. That included the emergency signing authority Jabari had as my spouse, and the core database Imani was currently using. It was the first thing I did for myself after coming to my senses. Not for revenge, but to take back what was mine. I grabbed Keisha's wrist. Give the box to Dr. Sterling Hayes. Don't give it to Jabari. Keisha's tears fell on my face. I'll get it to him myself. I said no more. The sky in my vision turned black. Before I lost consciousness, I heard a medic shout, "We've got cardiac arrest." In the distance, the ambulance carrying Jabari and Imani had completely disappeared. 3 days later, Jabari Thorne finally made it to the military hospital. Later, when Keisha showed me the hallway surveillance video, I saw him. He was still wearing the tattered uniform from that day, his right hand still stained with the disinfectant from Imani's surgery. He stopped the chief of medicine. "Which room is Zora Clark in?" The doctor stared at him for a long time without speaking. Jabari's voice was tight. I'm her husband. The doctor asked coldly. Now you remember you're her husband? Imani's condition was critical. I had to. Zora Clark passed away that same day. The warmth left Jabari Thorne's face instantly. The doctor threw a clear evidence bag at his chest. Inside was a single, charred, misshapen wedding ring. The ring was hooked onto the latch of a metal data box. This was all that was in her personal effects. Jabari caught the bag, his fingertips trembling so much he could barely hold it. He looked up, deep into the rows of hospital rooms. Where's the body? The doctor didn't answer because, at that moment, everyone thought the unidentified body in the morgue was me. And I, in reality, was lying in a civilian trauma center 200 miles away. No name, no family, just a wristband that read, Patient number 7. 4:17 a.m., I opened my eyes next to a ventilator. A nurse leaned over. Can you hear me? I blinked. She let out a sigh of relief. Your heart stopped for 11 minutes. We had to crack your chest twice to stop the bleeding. Someone's been looking for your information. Do you remember your name? I stared at the ceiling, my throat thick with the taste of blood. After a long while, I said 3 words. Zora Clark. The nurse quickly jotted it down. Emergency contact? I closed my eyes. The first name in my phone used to be Jabari Thorne. 8 years of marriage, over 3,000 days and nights, he was always number 1. But in that minefield, I finally understood. Being at the top of someone's contact list means nothing. When danger hits, a person's feet will carry them toward the one who truly matters. I opened my eyes. Change it to Sterling Hayes. What is your relationship to Jabari Thorne? It's ending. I was identified the afternoon after I woke up. A firefighter who had been part of the rescue came to the hospital to update casualty information and recognized me from a faint mole under my left brow bone. On the day of the accident, there were 9 injured and 2 dead. My protective jacket, before the blast, had been lent to a young volunteer who was cold. In the chaos of the rescue, that volunteer was mistaken for me. As for me, my wristband had fallen off and my face was covered in blood, so I was transported as a Jane Doe. The hospital immediately reported the identity correction. Jabari Thorne received the notification 2 hours later. At that moment, I had just had my intubation tube removed. Dr. Hayes sat by my bed, smoothing back my braids. He had been my graduate school advisor and one of the original founders of the Joint Military-Civilian Trauma Initiative. Jabari's on his way. My throat was raw, like it was being scrubbed with sandpaper. Have security stop him. Sterling looked at me. You sure? I nodded. And one more thing. Go on. File the papers with the hospital for me. Revoke Jabari's medical proxy rights as my spouse. Hospital transfers, surgeries, medical record access, he's not authorized to sign for any of it. Sterling was quiet for a few seconds. Zora, this isn't something you can take back in a fit of anger. I know you just came back from the dead. It's because I came back that I know who to trust my life with. Sterling didn't try to persuade me further. He handed me the form. My right hand had nerve damage. I couldn't hold a pen steady. In the end, I used my left hand, signing my name stroke by stroke. Each one was slow, but when I finished, I felt my breath come easy for the first time. At 6 p.m., there was an argument outside my room. Jabari Thorne wasn't in uniform. His hair was a mess, and a shadow of stubble covered his jaw. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. I'm her husband. Why can't I go in? Security said, Miss Clark has explicitly refused all visitors. She just woke up. She's not thinking clearly. I pressed the nurse's call button. When she came in, I said, let him in. Sterling frowned. Some things needed to be said face to face. When Jabari pushed the door open, his steps were hurried, but when he actually saw me, he froze at the doorway. A drainage tube was inserted in my chest, my abdomen was wrapped in bandages, and my left ear had temporary hearing loss from the blast. The urgency on his face quickly melted into an almost bewildered relief. Zora! He came to the bedside, reaching for my hand. I pulled it back. His motion froze. The hospital told me you were dead. Are you disappointed? Why would you think that? Because when you saw I was alive, your first question wasn't if I was in pain. Jabari's throat worked. I'm sorry. It was the first time he'd said it, but it was too late. I looked at the watch on his wrist. It was a gift from Imani last year. Back then, he'd said it was just a keepsake from a comrade, told me not to overthink it. After the explosion, when he carried her to the ambulance, that watch was pressed against his hip, closer to him than our wedding ring ever was. How is she? Jabari thought I was concerned. Imani's out of danger. She went into anaphylactic shock. I had to. You had internal bleeding. Epinephrine doesn't directly stop bleeding. Keisha said. My heart stopped. He fell silent. I pressed on. Was she breathing on her own then? Yes. Hair pulse? She had one. So, you took a life-saving drug from someone with no heartbeat and gave it to someone who had both a pulse and was breathing. The scene was chaotic. I didn't know your situation was that serious. The medic told you. I thought Keisha had made the wrong call. Why? He didn't answer. I answered for him. Because when Imani cried out in pain, you believed her. When it was my turn to lose consciousness, you thought I could still hold on. Jabari's brow furrowed tightly. Zora, I'm not a doctor. I had to make a choice in that moment. So I don't blame you for not knowing how to save a life, I said softly. A flicker of hope sparked in his eyes. I continued, I just don't want to keep living with someone who, every time there's a choice to be made, doesn't choose me. You just woke up. This isn't the time to talk about this. I've already signed the divorce papers. Who did it for you? That doesn't concern you. His voice grew heavy. I'm your husband. I looked up at him. On that minefield, you weren't. The room went quiet. The monitor beeped steadily. Jabari Thorne stared at me, as if discovering for the first time that I wasn't the person he thought he knew. For 8 years, I rarely asked him for anything. He canceled our anniversary dinner at the last minute. I said it was fine. He let Imani use our home to recover from an injury. I moved into my lab. His father was recovering from surgery. I put my project on hold to care for him for 4 months. His mother didn't like me taking long work trips. I voluntarily withdrew from the overseas deployment list. I had compressed all my dissatisfaction into a single phrase. It's okay. And so Jabari Thorne truly came to believe that nothing ever bothered me. He pulled up a chair and sat down. Imani's brother saved my life. I know. Before he died, her brother asked you to look after her. I also know that you've taken extra care of her all these years to repay that debt. Your debt? So why are you using my life to pay it? His face turned ashen. I looked out the window. Jabari, I won't hold it against you for who you chose to save. But from today on, I'm choosing myself. He suddenly remembered something. Why is the data center locked? Because the copyright belongs to me. That system is tied to border rescue operations. It can't be suspended over our marital issues. I've kept the basic rescue functions online. Active field units won't be affected. What's suspended is the Phase 2 data access and report generation that Imani requested. She was preparing for the center's final review. So what, Zora? You have to separate public and private matters. I laughed, and the pull on my abdominal wound made sweat bead on my forehead. 8 years ago, when I licensed my algorithm to you all for free, you said between husband and wife, there's no yours and mine. Now that I'm legally revoking a temporary authorization, you're telling me to separate public and private? Jabari Thorne stood up. You're using the project to force my hand. No. I looked at him and said word by word, I'm just cutting off the supply to a relationship that doesn't respect me. He left, and Sterling came in from outside. He placed a preliminary investigation report on my bedside table. 27 minutes before the incident, the Minefield's peripheral monitoring system did in fact issue a red alert. The alert was then manually downgraded. The operating account belonged to Imani Vance. Sterling lowered his voice. This explosion might not have been a simple accident. I stared at her name, my fingers slowly clenching. I used to think that Jabari just didn't choose me in a moment of life and death. But now it seems that what he and Imani owe me might be more than just a dose of epinephrine. A week later, I underwent a second surgery. Most of the shrapnel in my abdomen was removed, but the nerve damage in my left hand might be permanent. The doctor said, even with a smooth recovery, it would be difficult for me to perform precise equipment debugging in the future. I didn't cry when I heard the result. I just stared at my hands for a long time. These hands had been with me through 11 years of research. The first-generation battlefield monitor was something I soldered together from old motherboards and second-hand sensors in a rented room. Back then, Jabari was still a deputy commander at a training camp. We were newly married, so poor we didn't even have a proper desk. I'd be hunched over the dining table soldering circuits late into the night, and he would make me some hot soup, then warm my frozen hands in his. He said, "One day, when your device saves lives, I'll stand guard right next to it, so everyone knows you're the one who made it." Later, the device did save a lot of lives, but fewer and fewer people knew I was the one who made it. Jabari's rank got higher and higher. Imani joined the project as a medical consultant. She was good at writing reports, good at giving presentations, and she knew how to translate complex technical specs into the kind of language that superiors like to hear. And I stayed in the lab for long stretches, troubleshooting, fixing data, and patching her bugs. The first time my name was removed from the author list, Imani told me, "Zora, the tech people don't always have to be on stage. Jabari's career is at a critical point. You and he are one team. What difference does it make whose name is on it?" Jabari also advised me, "Imani needs this achievement for her promotion. You're talented. There will be more opportunities later." I agreed back then because I thought marriage was a joint account. What I lost would one day come back to us in another form. It wasn't until I was lying in that minefield that I learned some accounts were never joint. My contributions belonged to them, but their choices had nothing to do with me. Before I was discharged, Jabari came every day. I no longer refused him entry to my room, but I didn't talk about our personal life with him. The takeout he brought, I had the staff share with the next room. The flowers he sent, I had the nurse take away so they wouldn't affect my breathing. He'd sit by my bed and talk about Imani's condition, and I would only ask one question: "When will she be investigated?" Jabari frowned. "The account activity doesn't prove it was her. Her password could have been stolen. The login device was her work tablet. Someone else could have used it. Then why did she ask the survey team to enter that exact path right before the explosion?" Jabari fell silent. I looked at him. "Did you know about the alert?" His eyes flickered. The answer was clear. I slowly sat up. "I sent you a message before the accident. I was in a briefing. I wrote it very clearly. The northern sensor had abnormal readings. The survey should be postponed. Imani said it was a false alarm from old equipment. So you believed her." The field route was cleared by the EOD team. The clearance time was 3 days prior. There was heavy rain the night of the incident. Soil displacement could have washed mines into the pathway. I wrote all of this in the alert. Jabari hadn't read a single word. He said quietly, "If the investigation proves I was responsible, I'll bear it. What you're really afraid of isn't bearing the responsibility. Then what is it? It's admitting you trusted the wrong person." Jabari Thorne stood by the window, his back ramrod straight. After a long time, he said, "Imani wouldn't risk people's lives." I didn't argue. Once a person has given their trust to someone, it can't be immediately revoked with evidence alone. Just like it took me 8 years to admit he would never stand on my side. On the day of my discharge, I didn't go home. Sterling rented a small apartment for me near the research institute. Keisha helped me pack my things. When she went to the Thorne house, Imani was sitting in the living room. Even though Imani was out of the hospital, her face was still a little ashen, a thin layer of gauze wrapped around her wrist. She was wearing my slippers, and the teacup I always used was on the table. Keisha told me later that she almost threw the suitcase at her. Imani said Colonel Thorne let her stay, claiming she was shaken up after the explosion and couldn't be alone at night. I bent down to flip through the documents I'd brought back. He had let her stay over before. "You're not angry?" "What good would anger do?" Keisha bit her lip. "She even asked if you were planning to use the accident to stir up trouble." My hand stopped. What were her exact words? She said Zora is very talented technically, but she gets emotional whenever it comes to Jabari. Don't let a marital dispute destroy everyone's years of hard work. I pulled an old agreement from the pile of documents. It was the temporary algorithm authorization signed 3 years ago. The authorized party wasn't the military district, nor the trauma center, but the special task force led by Jabari. The term was 3 years, requiring my re-signature upon expiration. The deadline was exactly 5 days after the explosion. In other words, even if I had done nothing, Imani would have lost access to the complete database anyway. But in the review documents she submitted the day before the explosion, she claimed to have permanent usage rights. At the end of the document, there was a supplementary agreement. My signature was scanned and pasted onto it. Keisha gasped. "This is a forgery." I picked up my phone and contacted a notary and the Institute's legal department. First, to secure the electronic file, then to request a handwriting and creation time analysis. Keisha watched me expertly organize the evidence and suddenly asked, "Have you suspected her for a long time?" "No." "Then why did you keep all this?" "Because technology can be shared, but authority must have boundaries. I lost my boundaries in my marriage, but not in my work." That night, Jabari Thorne returned home. The bedroom closet held only his uniforms. In the bathroom, my toothbrush, towel, and skincare were all gone. The desk in the study was cleared. I had taken my certificates, hard drives, blueprints, and the philodendron I had been growing for 6 years. Our wedding photo was still hanging on the wall. Keisha hadn't taken it. I told her to turn it around to face the wall. Jabari Thorne stood in the empty house and called me 7 times. I didn't pick up. The 8th time, he sent a text. Do you really have to take it this far? I read it and put my phone on silent. Then, I signed my name for a 2nd time on the divorce authorization form. Division of assets. To be handled by the law. Sell joint property. Audit joint accounts. I didn't want his compensation, nor would I accept his attempts to hold on. Early in the morning, the Institute's inbox received a letter from Imani's team's lawyers. They, in turn, accused me of maliciously suspending the license, endangering a public health project, and demanded I immediately restore all permissions. I read the lawyer's letter and printed it out. On the last page, I used my injured hand to write a single line. Restoration denied. The next day, this lawyer's letter, along with the forged agreement, was submitted by me to the Joint Investigation Team. News of the project's suspension spread quickly. To be precise, the entire rescue system wasn't suspended. I had preserved the basic monitoring, alert, and patient transport functions of the field equipment. I only closed the Phase 2 research database, the model training interface, and the rights to publish personal findings. The injured would not be affected. The only person affected was Imani, whose research center was on the verge of its final review. She had prepared for 2 years, just waiting to use this batch of data to secure the director's position. So, she was the one in the biggest hurry. On the 3rd day, she came to see me. We met in the Research Institute's reception room. Imani wore a white turtleneck sweater and light makeup, looking soft and vulnerable. She placed a box of medicine in front of me. I heard your hand still hurts. This is a specialized nerve supplement I got through a private clinic. I didn't touch it. It's not approved by the FDA. Her smile stiffened. I just wanted to show I care. Someone who cares about me wouldn't, while I was in a coma, submit a permanent authorization agreement in my name. Imani sighed softly. Zora, you misunderstand me so deeply. The signature is not a misunderstanding. Jabari had someone prepare that agreement. He said you two were husband and wife, that you wouldn't object. Jabari Thorne told you to forge my signature? I didn't say it was forged. Then let's wait for the analysis results. Her fingers paused on the tabletop. Then, she changed her tone. If the project fails, I'm not the only one who will be affected. Jabari was in charge of its development. His management ability will also be questioned. So, you two can have your marital spats, but there's no need to drag his career into it. I looked up. At the scene of the explosion, when he chose you, did you ever think about dragging my life into it? The gentle facade on Imani's face finally cracked. The epinephrine wouldn't have worked on your injuries. You didn't need it then, but I have a history of allergies. Your blood oxygen level, heart rate, and respiratory rate were all recorded by the monitoring device. You had no laryngeal edema, no circulatory failure. She stared at me. The field data box was burned. I didn't reply. She quickly realized her mistake. Whether the data box was damaged or not had never been publicly announced by the investigation team. The doctor had only told Jabari that a metal box was among the personal effects. Yet Imani knew its condition. I asked calmly, "Who told you the box was burned?" "Jabari. He never opened it. I must have misremembered." "You're very afraid of what's inside being recovered." Imani picked up her water glass and slowly took a sip. "I'm just worried you'll get lost in hatred. Zora, you've always thought I stole your husband, your work, your position, but some things weren't stolen by me. They were things you couldn't hold on to yourself. Like Jabari, he needs someone who can stand on stage with him. You only know how to bury your head in your work, shrinking back whenever there's any communicating to be done. Do you have any idea how much pressure he shielded you from? So he protected me by removing my name from my own work? At least he gave you a stable life." I laughed. "That house? I paid 70% of the down payment. The care and rehabilitation for his father for 2 years? I handled that. The first 3 years of maintenance fees for your center's equipment? I paid for that with my project bonus. Imani, you're sitting on a sofa I paid for, using a system I designed, advising me to be grateful to a man who took credit for my work." Her face went completely cold. "You just have to make an enemy out of everyone. I don't decide who the enemy is." I pressed the stop button on the recorder pen on the table. "Actions do." Imani's gaze shot to the pen. "You were recording? There's a sign outside the reception room. You signed a consent form when you came in." She stood up to grab her bag and headed for the door. She turned back to look at me. You think one agreement can bring me down? It can't. Then what are you so pleased about? I'm waiting for you to make another mistake. She slammed the door and left. That night, a long article suddenly appeared online. It didn't use my full name, only saying that a scientist, a military wife, turned off a life-saving system in a fit of anger because her husband prioritized saving a colleague, causing numerous grassroots units to be unable to conduct normal training. The article included a photo of me leaving the hospital. In the picture, I was in a wheelchair, with Jabari standing in the distance. The headline was glaring. She almost died in a minefield, but takes her anger out on all soldiers. Public opinion quickly erupted. Some sympathized with me, but many more cursed me for bringing a marital dispute into a public project. The Research Institute held an emergency meeting. The director asked me to temporarily suspend my work to cooperate with the investigation. My lab access was revoked, and my office computer was sealed. Keisha was shaking with anger. This article was definitely posted by Imani. I put down my phone. What she really wants isn't the online hate. Then what is it? To force me, in order to prove my innocence, to release the accident data. That batch of data was related to the accident investigation. Before it was officially declassified, any individual who released it could be charged with a violation. As long as I acted impulsively just once, Imani could turn the entire issue into Zora Clark illegally disclosing secrets. She understood my old personality very well. I wasn't good at explaining myself. When misunderstood, my first instinct was to lay out all the evidence. But this time, I didn't react. I only had the legal department issue a short statement. The basic rescue function had never been suspended. The suspension of research permissions was in accordance with the law and the contract. All accident evidence had been handed over to the Joint Investigation Team. No further public discussion on other matters. Jabari called me after the statement was released. The article wasn't posted by Imani. Did you investigate? She has no reason to do that. You believe her again. Zora, restore the permissions, and the public opinion will naturally die down. So you do know how to make it die down. He was silent for 2 seconds. Don't push things to a point where they can't be salvaged. I looked at the locked door of my lab. The one who can't be salvaged isn't me. The next morning, the Joint Investigation Team informed me that the accident data box had suffered a serious incident during transport for analysis. The internal storage chip was burned out, and most of the on-site records might be unrecoverable. At the same time, Imani submitted a statement to the center. She admitted to logging into the risk system, but claimed she was acting on Jabari's verbal orders to adjust the level of a false alarm. She pushed all the responsibility onto him. Jabari Thorne took the initiative to meet me for the first time on the evening after Imani submitted her statement. We met at a coffee shop near the Civic Center. He was much thinner than before, his uniform still neat, but his shoulders no longer held their usual straight posture. He placed Imani's statement on the table. You knew she would say this. I didn't. You warned him. Before the explosion, the person I warned was you. His fingers pressed down on the paper. She says modifying the risk level was my order. Was it? Jabari didn't deny it immediately. The last bit of luck in my heart evaporated. He really did know. That morning, the system had issued 2 consecutive alerts. According to safety protocols, the survey route should have been halted for a recheck. But the inspection team was leaving the next day. If the demonstration was canceled, the emergency center Imani was building couldn't be reviewed on schedule. Jabari, worried about affecting the entire project, had approved them to use a handheld device for a preliminary recheck. Imani had assured him it was just sensor drift due to the heavy rain. The handheld device detected no abnormalities. So, Jabari agreed to proceed with the original route. I didn't completely ignore the risk, he explained. The EOD team rechecked the entrance. How far did they check? 30 meters. The explosion point was 47 meters from the entrance. He closed his eyes. I didn't know the mines had shifted, but my report wrote about that possibility. Everyone was waiting for my decision at the time. So you chose the answer that best suited the schedule. He looked up. If we stop for every alert, many missions would be impossible to complete. Is that why you deleted the alert record before the accident? Jabari's expression changed abruptly. I didn't delete it. Before the data was sent for analysis, the last person to handle it was your aide. He was just following handover procedures. When the box arrived at the lab, the connection port had clear signs of being tampered with. Are you suspecting me of destroying evidence? I suspect everyone who tries to turn responsibility into a misunderstanding. Jabari lowered his voice. Zora, things have gotten very complicated. If you keep pursuing this, you might not get the outcome you want. What outcome do I want? For Imani to pay the price? For you to regret it? For everyone to admit they wronged me? You were wrong. I looked him straight in the eye. I want to know why someone modified a safety alert, why my work was used without permission, why a person with vital signs was left behind at the scene. If these questions aren't answered, the next person lying on the ground might not be me. The coffee had gone cold. Jabari didn't drink it. He took another document from his briefcase. It was the suspension notice the Research Institute had sent me. During the investigation, you are not allowed to have contact with the project. I've already received it. The accident data involves military operations. You must also hand over any personal backups. According to the agreement, the device's core algorithm is jointly owned by the Research Institute and me. The operating logs do not belong to you. I will cooperate with the investigation in accordance with the law. It's not about cooperating with the law, he said, word for word. Tomorrow morning, hand over all storage devices in your possession to the task force. Otherwise, they will charge you with illegal possession of sensitive data. This was his first direct counterattack, not as a husband, but as a man in power demanding my silence. I asked, "Is this your decision?" "I'm protecting you." That phrase again. Removing my name was for my protection. Concealing risks was for my protection. Taking away life-saving medicine was for my protection. Now, turning me into a suspect was also for my protection. I nodded. Okay. Jabari seemed surprised. I agreed so quickly. I'll be there at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Before he stood up, his gaze fell on my empty ring finger. Where's the ring? In the evidence room. Pending the end of the investigation. I'll have someone fix it. No need. That's our wedding ring. Now it's evidence in an accident. The next day, I arrived at the task force on time. My computer, hard drives, lab notes, and phone were all sealed. An officer had me sign the inventory list. After signing the last page, my personal accounts were also temporarily restricted from large expenditures, with the justification that a portion of the project bonus within them needed to have its source verified. I couldn't pay for the next phase of my rehabilitation. The small apartment from the institute was designated for rotating talent. During my suspension, I had to move out within 15 days. Jabari's counterattack was effective. Overnight, I lost my lab, my income, my home, and my public voice. The articles online continued to circulate. Someone pasted my photo on the institute's gate, while others called me a crazy woman using a public project to blackmail her husband. Sterling offered to pay for my medical expenses with his own money, but I refused. I sold a small condo I had bought before getting married. It wasn't large and had always been rented out. It was originally the fallback plan I had set for myself. Jabari had told me to sell it several times, saying a married couple didn't need to be so separate. I was glad I hadn't listened. When I signed the sales contract, the agent asked if I was sure, since selling in a hurry would mean a significant loss. I nodded. I'm sure. I used part of the money to pay for my treatment, and the rest I deposited into an independent account. The price was real, but living on my own money was still lighter than depending on someone who could revoke my privileges at any moment. 5 days after all my devices were confiscated, Keisha came to find me. She pulled a small, thumb-sized silver chip from the inner layer of her jacket. The secondary cache automatically ejected before the data box was damaged. I was stunned. You've had this the whole time? That day, you told me to give the box to Dr. Hayes. When the ambulance jolted, the slot on the side popped open. I thought it was a regular part, so I just put it in my pocket. Her eyes were red. Later, when the investigation team said the data box was completely destroyed, I knew something was wrong. I didn't take it right away. Have you told anyone? No. This could contain sensitive data. Keeping it privately could get you disciplined. I know. Then why bring it to me? Keisha looked at me. Because your heart stopped that day. But Colonel Thorne told me to take care of Dr. Vance first. He said your injuries were minor, but I couldn't find your pulse. I don't want the truth to die a second time. The chip wasn't a complete backup. It could only store verification codes and the voice index from the last 60 minutes before the device lost power. The real data was still on an automatic synchronization server. That server wasn't under Jabari's management, nor was it part of Imani's center. It belonged to the device manufacturer, located at a backup node overseas. According to the original agreement, a retrieval request could only be made in 2 scenarios: a major accident investigation, or if the personal safety of the device's inventor was threatened. This agreement was something I had written into the system myself 10 years ago. I held the chip. For the first time after losing all my rights, I saw a path forward. But to get the data, I had to go through an interdisciplinary ethics review, which would take at least 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Imani only needed 3 days to get the task force to determine that all modifications came from Jabari's verbal command. I had to find a second person who could prove she actively changed the route before she closed the evidence chain. I remembered a young face I had seen near the warning line before the explosion. He was the technician in charge of the handheld survey device. When the alarm sounded, he had tried to stop Imani, but she had pushed his hand away. That technician was not on the current witness list, because the day after the explosion, he had applied for a transfer away from Fort Ridgeview. The technician's name was Jamal Petty, 26, in the EOD support team for less than 2 years. After the accident, he was reassigned to a warehouse in the south, in charge of equipment registration. I couldn't contact him directly. During the investigation, all involved parties were required to avoid private contact. Sterling advised me to go through official channels to request adding a witness. The application was submitted. 3 days passed with no response. On the 4th day, the task force announced that Jamal had submitted a written statement. His statement was only 2 sentences long. Handheld device test results were normal. I personally did not observe any violations. It was too clean, like a pre-written answer. I didn't pursue Jamal further. Instead, I went back to organizing the public materials from before the accident. To get the center approved, Imani had filmed a promotional video. It was posted the day before the explosion. In it, she stood at the entrance of the path, introducing a new model of handheld detector. As the camera panned across the control screen, a string of device serial numbers appeared in the upper right corner. I paused the video and zoomed in. The last number was 0721. In the accident investigation file, the serial number of the device used for the recheck was 0712. A difference of only 2 digits, but they were not the same device. I immediately contacted the manufacturer. They replied that device number 0721 had a faulty probe and had been taken out of service a week before the accident. Device number 0712 was functioning normally, but had never been brought to the minefield site. In other words, the recheck that day was performed with a faulty device. Someone had changed the serial number in the accident report. This was no longer a misjudgment, but a forgery of safety procedures. I submitted the manufacturer's certification to the Joint Investigation Team. That evening, Jamal proactively contacted Sterling. He asked to see me. The meeting was set in the interrogation room of the investigation team, the entire process recorded. Jamal entered, his face ashen. He held an opened letter. This is a letter my mother received. There are no threats in it, just my little sister's school records, and a photo taken in front of their house. The sender is anonymous. His voice trembled. Someone is sending me a message. They know where my family lives. I asked. Your original statement, who told you to write it? The deputy team leader. Who gave the order to the deputy team leader? He said it was Colonel Thorne's office, that we needed to unify our statements. Jabari Thorne. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by a cold hand. Jamal continued. But changing the device number wasn't Colonel Thorne's idea. On the morning of the accident, Imani came to me. She said that although device 0721 had been reported as faulty, it was just a data display lag and didn't affect its use. She demanded I use it to complete a quick check. I refused. Then Imani told me Colonel Thorne had already approved the demonstration to proceed on time. If the review failed because of my delay, I'd be transferred out of my tech position. Then, the machine showed a normal reading. She told me to sign. Did you sign? No. Jamal lowered his head. She took my work ID. The electronic signature on the accident report was generated using my card. Why didn't you say this from the beginning? After the explosion, the deputy team leader told me Colonel Thorne would handle it. He said as long as it was determined to be a natural mind shift, no one would face serious charges. I asked, and you believed him? Jamal's eyes turned red. 2 of our colleagues died. I see them every night when I sleep. I was scared to talk, but I'm even more scared to stay silent now. This testimony changed the direction of the investigation. But that very day, the task force suddenly took Jamal away for separate questioning, citing a procedural violation. His testimony was temporarily sealed. The outside world didn't know what had happened. Imani once again acted first. She convened an internal debriefing. She admitted to suggesting the use of device 0721, but claimed she didn't know it was out of service. She blamed the operational responsibility on Jamal, and then pinned the order to unify statements on Jabari Thorne. She even submitted a few recorded conversations with Jabari. One of them read, "Proceed as planned. I'll take responsibility for any problems." The sender, Jabari Thorne. That message left him completely exposed. Jabari Thorne was temporarily suspended from his duties to undergo investigation. That night, he came to the temporary apartment I was renting. I didn't let him in. He stood in the hallway, looking at me through the cracked open door. "You found Jamal." He chose to speak up. "I wasn't the one who sent his sister's information." "I didn't say you were. But in your heart, you've already decided it was me. Because after the accident, the order to unify the statements came from your office." Jabari closed his eyes. "I just didn't want things to escalate while the evidence was incomplete. So you told everyone to say the same thing?" "I thought the alert modification and the device number were just procedural issues." "Are 2 deaths also a procedural issue?" His voice grew hoarse. "Zora, I know I was wrong." "Where were you wrong?" "I approved the route." "It's more than that." "I shouldn't have told everyone to unify their statements." "It's more than that." "I shouldn't have taken Imani first." I looked at him. "Do you regret it now because I almost died? Or because Imani threw the blame on you?" Jabari's lips moved. There was no answer. I moved to close the door. He put his hand out to stop it. "Her brother took a blast for me once." This was the first time he had mentioned the details of that story. 10 years ago, Jabari was injured during a border rescue. Imani's brother, Damien, died in a secondary collapse while pulling him out of the danger zone. His last words were, "Take care of Imani." Jabari had treated those words like a lifelong command. Imani wanted to join the military medical system. He helped. She needed a research project. He gave it to her. Her abilities were questioned. He stood up for her. She made a mistake. His first reaction was always to protect. "I always thought that as long as I took good care of her, I would have repaid Damien for his life," Jabari said quietly. "That day, when she called my name, all I could think about was what happened 10 years ago. I never intended to abandon you. But you did abandon me. Give me a chance to make it right." I looked at his hand. This hand had carried Imani in the minefield, and now it was blocking my door, preventing me from closing it. "Jabari, you owe Damien a life. That doesn't mean I owe him one too. You can use your career, your time, and your feelings to repay your debt. But you have no right to decide for me whether we pay it together." His hand slowly fell away. I closed the door. The next day, the Interdisciplinary Ethics Committee approved the retrieval of the backup data. The silver chip was taken to the decryption lab. An officer told me a full recovery would take 24 hours. But 12 hours later, the server was suddenly hit with a remote wipe command. The request was made using my digital certificate. Someone was using my identity to destroy the last piece of evidence. The remote wipe failed. The system required dual authentication. The first layer was my digital certificate. The second layer was the physical authentication from the data box. The key wasn't a real key, but a microscopic metal code embedded inside my wedding ring. 10 years ago, when I designed the device, I was worried about battlefield data being remotely tampered with, so I specifically created an offline authentication. Jabari knew about this back then. He even joked about me tying my work to a wedding ring. "If I lose your ring one day, will I be court-martialed?" I had replied then, "Well, that depends on whether you lose the ring, or you lose my trust." No one could have predicted that joke would become reality. The wedding ring was still in the Joint Investigation Team's evidence room. The remote operator couldn't complete the second layer of authentication. The data was preserved. But the person using my certificate had also successfully cast suspicion on me. The task force interrogated me for a second time that day. "Miss Clark, did you ever request to delete the data after the accident?" "No." "Is the digital certificate held only by you?" A week before the explosion, Imani's team asked me to debug the central system remotely. I logged in once on her office computer. "Did you log out?" "Yes." "Is it possible it left a cache?" "It's possible." I wouldn't deny a technical risk just to protect myself. The investigator asked, "Can you prove it wasn't you who performed the operation?" When the deletion request was sent, I was at the hospital for nerve rehabilitation. The treatment room has surveillance cameras. The request could have been pre-scheduled. Then check the script creation time and the device fingerprint. The computer in question has had its system reinstalled. Who reinstalled it? The IT staff from Imani's team. Another lead cut off. Imani increasingly seemed like someone who had prepared meticulously. She wasn't just someone shirking responsibility after an explosion. From forging the authorization agreement, to swapping the device numbers, to deleting the alert and unifying statements, she was used to placing all risks under someone else's name. Jabari was just her most heavily weighted shield, and I was her most convenient technical resource. I wasn't charged that day, but the investigation team restricted my travel and required me to be available for questioning at any time. The Research Institute also officially terminated my employment contract. The director said over the phone, "Zora, personally, I believe you, but the public pressure and scrutiny are too great right now." I asked, "What about my position on the project?" "It will be temporarily taken over by Imani's team. She's under investigation for the accident. She hasn't been suspended from her duties." I understand. For many people, the truth is less important than efficiency. As long as the system needed to keep running, they would prioritize keeping the person who looked like they could maintain order, even if that person was the one creating the chaos. When I moved out of the Institute's apartment, I had only 2 cardboard boxes. Sterling came to help me. He looked at the empty room, and his eyes suddenly turned red. 11 years of your work are all in that lab. The original patents are still in my name, but they've taken the equipment team and the resources. Then I'll start from scratch. Your hand. I looked at my left hand, still unable to fully straighten. If I can't solder a circuit board, I can still draw the architecture. If I can't do fine manipulations, I can still teach others to do them. They can take away the room, but they can't take away the reason I designed this system in the first place. The new place was an old apartment with no elevator. My abdominal wound hadn't fully healed, and I had to stop and breathe after every floor. The money from selling the condo, after paying for medical bills and living expenses during the investigation, was running low. I turned the living room into a temporary workspace. The desk was from a second-hand market. The monitor had a crack at the edge. The first night, it rained outside. I used my right hand to slowly redraw the system's security architecture. The biggest flaw in the old system wasn't the sensor accuracy, but the over-centralized authority. A single doctor could modify a risk level, a single person in charge could demand unified statements, and a single person with my digital certificate could impersonate me to request a record wipe. Technology doesn't betray, power without boundaries does. At 1 a.m., there was a knock on the door. I looked through the peephole and saw Jabari's mother, Eleanor Thorne. She was carrying a covered Pyrex dish, with the Thorne family driver behind her. I opened the door but didn't let her in. Eleanor frowned. "I came all this way to see you, and you're going to leave me standing in the hallway? The house is a mess. When you were taking care of your father and me, you never complained our house was a mess." She pushed the dish into my hands. "Jabari's been suspended." "I know. Imani says all those decisions were his. But you know what kind of person Jabari is, don't you? At most, he was just eager to complete the mission. He would never intentionally harm anyone. No one said he did it intentionally. Then go explain to the investigation team. Say there was a misunderstanding in the work arrangements and communication between you as husband and wife. I wasn't part of their conversation. You could withdraw the request for the analysis of the authorization agreement." So she hadn't come to visit, but to negotiate. I placed the dish back in her hands. The signature was forged. It can't be made real just because Jabari is implicated. Eleanor's face darkened. 8 years of marriage, and you're just going to watch him be ruined? Letting him take responsibility for what he did is not ruining him. You weren't like this before. Before, I thought forbearance could earn respect. Now I know it can't. She looked at my injured hand. You've lost your job, and your body is in this state. Without Jabari, what will you rely on to live? The words were familiar. Imani had said them too. Jabari gave you a stable life. They all saw my contributions as a form of dependence. I flexed my stiff fingers slightly. I'll rely on myself. Eleanor laughed coldly. You think the world out there is going to give you a chance just because you were wronged? It won't. That's why I won't rely on being wronged to get a chance. Before I closed the door, she raised her voice. You refuse to turn back. You'll regret it sooner or later. After the door closed, I leaned against the wall and stood there for a long time. Not because I was wavering, but because the wound hurt. The phone on the table buzzed. The decryption lab sent a notification. The backup data had been restored. Besides the on-site vital signs from the explosion and the risk modification logs, they had also found an encrypted audio recording from before the accident. In the recording, Imani said to Jabari, "As long as today goes smoothly, the center's approval is ours." Jabari asked, "How do we handle things on Zora's end?" Imani laughed. She can't leave you. After this is over, you just have to coax her a little, and she'll sign her name just like before. Jabari didn't object. A few seconds later, he said, "The route must be safe." Imani replied, "Jabari, you don't even trust me?" The recording was cut off there. After that sentence, Jabari had approved the operation. He had trusted her, because he was so sure I would never leave. The complete data could not be released directly. The joint investigation team first conducted a validation of its authenticity. The server timestamps, device verification codes, the silver chip index, and the physical key in the wedding ring all matched. There was no possibility of later modification. The first official hearing was scheduled for the 47th day after the accident. The hearing was not open to the public. Attendees included the accident investigators, representatives from the Research Institute, project leaders, victims' families, and relevant witnesses. I sat at the far right, my left hand in a rehabilitation brace. Jabari Thorne sat opposite me. After a month of suspension, the sharp edge about him had softened considerably. Imani Vance sat next to him, but deliberately left an empty chair between them. The moderator first played back the route alert record. After the red risk alert appeared, Imani's account logged in 3 times within 7 minutes. The first time to view, the second to downgrade, and the third to delete the automated notification. She explained, "I wasn't the only one who used that work tablet." The investigator asked, "The device uses fingerprint authentication. The explosion caused some memory loss. The operation took place before the explosion." Her expression changed slightly. Then, the manufacturer's certification and the device serial number records were presented. The faulty device, number 0721, was signed out by Imani. She still insisted she didn't understand the detection equipment and was only responsible for the medical demonstration. Jamal's testimony was read aloud, and she looked towards Jabari. "Jabari, you know I was just following your arrangements." Jabari didn't look at her. The moderator asked him, "Did you verbally order them to proceed with the original plan?" "Yes." "Did you know the system had issued a red alert?" "I knew." "Why did you still approve it?" Jabari was silent for a moment. Dr. Vance judged it to be a false alarm. The recheck with the handheld device also showed it was normal. "Did you read the risk report submitted by Zora Clark?" "I didn't read all of it." "Was the report sent to you?" "It was." "Why didn't you read it?" Jabari's gaze fell on me. We were preparing for the final review briefing at the time. The moderator continued. "After the accident occurred, did you instruct the relevant personnel to unify their external explanations?" "Yes." "What was the purpose?" "To prevent unverified information from spreading." "Did you request the deletion of the alert record?" "No." "Did you request the destruction of the data box?" "No." He spoke very slowly, each word seemingly ground out from his throat. Next was the playback of the on-site audio from the explosion. The sound of wind, alarms, and metal clashing merged. Keisha screamed, "Zora's in cardiac arrest. Get the epinephrine." Immediately after was Imani's voice. "Jabari, I can't breathe." Jabari said to give it to her. Keisha protested. "She has a pulse, Zora doesn't." Jabari's voice grew heavier. I said, "Give it to Imani." No one in the hearing room spoke. I had thought I would be angry listening to it again. But sitting there, I only felt cold. The record showed Imani's blood oxygen level was 95%, heart rate 108, with spontaneous breathing and stable blood pressure. She was hyperventilating from panic. As for me, my heart had stopped 2 minutes and 40 seconds after the explosion. After the only dose of life-saving epinephrine at the scene was taken away, Keisha could only continue chest compressions. If the second rescue team hadn't arrived 7 minutes earlier, I wouldn't have survived. Imani suddenly said, "I didn't know Zora was that serious." Keisha stood up. "I'm a medic. I said it 3 times in a row. You heard me." Imani's eyes quickly reddened. "I was scared too." Keisha looked at her. "Being scared isn't a crime. Using someone's bias towards you to take away medicine from a patient with no heartbeat is." Imani turned to me. "Zora, I didn't want you to die." I finally spoke. "I believe you." She was stunned. "You just thought that even if I got hurt, someone would save me. That even if I lost my name on the author list, there would be other chances. That even if you forged a signature, I would eventually accept it. That even if there was a problem with the route, someone else could take the blame. Every single time, you didn't want to destroy anyone. You just always left the consequences for others to deal with." The tears on her face stopped. At this point, the investigator announced the device fingerprint of the remote wipe request. The request came from a computer in Imani's office. Before the system was reinstalled, the hard drive had automatically sent a maintenance log to the unit's asset management server. The log showed that the wipe script was created while I was still in a coma. The creating account was not Imani's, but her team's IT staff. The IT staff member had already admitted that Imani told him it was test data that I had agreed to delete. Imani shot up from her seat. He's lying. The moderator rapped the table. Please be seated. Everyone is targeting me. Jamal is afraid of taking responsibility. The IT guy is afraid of taking responsibility. Jabari Thorne, to protect himself, will only push the blame onto me. She finally stopped calling him Jabari. Jabari Thorne slowly raised his head. Have I ever pushed the blame onto you? Imani looked at him. You've already admitted to approving the route. That is what I did. What else are you going to admit? I will admit to everything I did. Jabari's voice was calm. But the part that's yours, you carry it yourself. Imani's expression froze. The person she had relied on most had finally stopped shielding her. But the hearing didn't bring me an immediate victory. Before it concluded, the Research Institute's representative proposed that, although my authorization agreement was forged, I had in the past tacitly allowed Imani to use the system for a long time, which could have formed a de facto authorization. They requested to continue holding onto the project and to postpone the reinstatement of my position. At the same time, Jabari Thorne's representative argued that during the time of the accident, the project's profits belonged to our joint marital property. If I insisted on divorcing and revoking the authorization, they would apply to freeze the profits from the related patents pending division of assets. When I walked out of the hearing, the media swarmed the doors. Someone asked, Miss Clark, are you using the accident to fight for ownership of the project? Someone else asked, do you forgive Colonel Thorne? I didn't answer the second question. I just said one thing to the cameras. The system can continue to save lives, but anyone who wants to continue using it must first put the real author's name back on it. That night, the Research Institute released a temporary project roster. The position of Chief Technical Advisor, for the first time, officially had my name on it. Imani's name had been removed. This wasn't the end. It was just a small piece of what had been taken over 11 years, finally returned. After the hearing, Jabari Thorne requested to see me. The location was still the investigation team's meeting room. The table was long, and we sat at opposite ends. In front of him was the clear evidence bag containing the wedding ring. The investigation team is preparing to return the ring to you. The case isn't over. The core analysis is complete. They can retain the images and data. Then give it to my representative. Jabari's fingers stiffened. You don't want to touch it? I don't want to treat evidence like a souvenir anymore. He asked quietly, when you first made the data box, why did you put the secret key in the wedding ring? Back then, I believed the person closest to me wouldn't harm me. And now? Now I believe that power should be held in one's own hands. Jabari looked at the ring in the evidence bag. The band was deformed, and the inscription inside was half-charred. Never forsaken, only the word never was still clearly visible. Do we have to get divorced? We do. I will accept the results of the investigation. That's your responsibility. I can withdraw from the project, and I won't fight for the patent profits. Those are things you shouldn't have fought for in the first place. Zora, I don't know what else I can do to make it up to you. Then don't. He looked up. You're really not giving me any chance at all? Jabari, do you think that just because you finally admit you were wrong, I should admit you're still worthy of forgiveness? His lips pressed into a tight line. I continued. Before the accident, I sent you a 17-page risk report. You didn't look at it. When the explosion happened, Keisha clearly told you my heart had stopped. You didn't believe her. After the accident, you told everyone to unify their stories. When I sought evidence, you used the pretext of sensitive data to take away my equipment. You didn't just make one wrong choice. You, at every moment you should have trusted me, chose the more convenient side. Jabari lowered his head. After a long time, he said, I thought you would never leave. I know. Imani said that too. You both treated my patience as if it had no limits. There were footsteps outside the door. Our time was almost up. Jabari suddenly asked, after you were taken to the city hospital, why didn't you contact me right away? When I woke up, my identity hadn't been confirmed yet. And after? After I didn't want to. If I had known sooner that you were alive, would things have been different? He didn't finish the thought. Perhaps nothing would have been different. He would have rushed to the hospital, apologized, and taken care of me. Then he would have asked me to understand his choice, asked me to preserve the project, asked me to believe Imani meant no harm. The thing that truly changed everything wasn't that he thought I was dead. It was that I finally stopped cooperating to keep his world running. The divorce mediation was scheduled a week later. Jabari didn't contest the house. Joint assets were sold and divided according to each party's capital contribution and debt repayment during the marriage. The rehabilitation fund for his father remained under my management. I reorganized all the accounts and handed them over to a professional agency. Eleanor blocked me outside the mediation room. Your father has trusted you the most these past few years. The agency will arrange for professional therapists from now on. Is family the same as an agency? Of course not. That's why family shouldn't treat one person's contributions as a free service. Her expression was grim. He treated you like his own daughter. But when I was lying in the hospital, the first time you came to see me was to tell me to withdraw my request for analysis. Eleanor was speechless. On the day the divorce agreement was signed, Jabari wasn't late. He paused for a long time on the final line. The clerk reminded both parties to confirm there were no errors before signing. He asked me, "Will we see each other again?" "Not after the investigation and asset procedures are complete." "What if the project needs military cooperation?" "Contact me through official channels." "What if I just want to see you?" "There's no need for that." He finally signed his name. When we walked out of the service center, a light rain was falling. A driver was waiting with an umbrella on the steps. Jabari didn't walk over. He stood behind me and called out, "Zora." I stopped. "That day, you asked me if I would regret it if you died." I hesitated, not because I didn't care about you. I was afraid to answer. I didn't turn around. His voice grew hoarse. "Now I can tell you, yes. I regret it every single day." Rain dripped from the edge of my umbrella. I watched the cars pass slowly on the street. But I didn't live just to wait for you to regret it. I stepped off the curb. At that moment, the marriage was officially over. And the joint investigation had one last question. During the transport of the data box, who had damaged the connection port? Both transport officers denied touching the device. The aide also insisted he was only responsible for transport, until a traffic camera video from an intersection was recovered. The vehicle had stopped for 9 minutes on the road. Imani had gotten into the car. The final hearing was held on the 72nd day after the accident. This time, parts of it were open to the media. The hall was packed. The families of the two deceased sat in the front row. Jamal was there too. His sister had been moved to a safe location. The source of the anonymous threatening letter was still under investigation. Imani was not wearing her white coat. Next to her was her representative, her expression calmly detached. Jabari sat alone on another side. After the hearing began, the vehicle surveillance video was played. During the transport of the accident data box, the transport vehicle had stopped on a side road with no surveillance. Imani got into the vehicle for 9 minutes. She explained that she just wanted to confirm my personal effects. The investigator asked, "How did you know the data box was in the car?" "Jabari Thorne's aide told me." The aide immediately denied it. Dr. Vance called and said Colonel Thorne wanted her to check the personal belongings of the injured. Jabari Thorne looked at Imani. "I never gave that order." The investigator presented the call records. When Imani contacted the aide, Jabari was at the morgue identifying the deceased. He had made no calls to her. The fine scratches on the data box's connection port matched a pair of disassembly pliers from Imani's office toolkit. She had tried to open the device. When she failed, she damaged the external port, hoping the investigators would determine the chip was burned out. "I just wanted to prevent unverified data from being leaked," she said. "You had no authority over the data at that time. I was the head of the center. You had not yet been officially appointed. Everyone assumed I would take the position." Hearing this, I suddenly understood why she had dared to go so far. Assumption. She assumed my work could be hers. She assumed Jabari would protect her. She assumed someone else would always take the fall. She assumed that as long as the center needed her, procedures and boundaries could be bent. The moderator invited me to explain the authorization and data ownership. I didn't talk about the marriage, nor did I talk about almost dying. I presented 3 documents. First, the original patent certificate. Second, the 3-year temporary authorization agreement. Third, the forged supplementary agreement submitted by Imani. Handwriting analysis and the electronic creation time showed that the signature in the supplementary agreement came from a conference sign-in sheet I had signed 5 years prior. The file was created the night before the explosion. The computer used to create it was in Imani's office. Her representative argued, "It cannot be proven that Dr. Vance created the file herself." I played the recording from the reception room. Imani herself had said, Jabari had someone prepare that agreement. He said you two were husband and wife, that you wouldn't object. She didn't deny the agreement's existence, only shifted the blame to Jabari. When questioned, Jabari stood up. I have never authorized anyone to forge Zora Clark's signature, but I did tell Imani multiple times that Zora would not refuse the project's requests. This statement led her to believe that even without written consent, she could proceed. My permissiveness enabled her infringement. For the first time, he didn't hide behind a misunderstanding, but admitting it couldn't erase the outcome. Finally, the complete on-site data was played. On the large screen, two life curve lines appeared simultaneously. Green represented Imani, red represented me. Imani's blood oxygen level remained above 94%. My heart rate dropped rapidly after the explosion. At 2 minutes and 40 seconds, the red line flatlined. Keisha requested epinephrine. Jabari took the drug away. The red line remained flat. It wasn't until the second rescue team arrived that faint waves reappeared. Among the families of the two deceased, someone began to sob. Because the faulty detector that day not only led us into a danger zone, but also delayed the risk assessment for a subsequent explosion. The second blast claimed the lives of 2 support staff members. Imani finally lost her composure. I just wanted the center to be approved. This system can save so many people. If we had canceled that day, years of investment would have been wasted. Everyone would have blamed me. The moderator asked, So you modified the risk level? I thought it was just a false alarm. So you used a faulty device? A working one couldn't be deployed in time. So you forged the records? I did it to keep the project going. So you took the life-saving medicine? She suddenly fell silent. All eyes were on her. She slowly turned to Jabari. He gave it to me. I didn't take it. Jabari's face was ashen. Yes, I gave it to her. He looked towards the front row where the victim's family sat, then at me. The on-site medic clearly announced that Zora Clark was in cardiac arrest. I still made the wrong decision. The responsibility is mine. Imani seemed to grab onto a final lifeline. You hear that? It's his responsibility. I looked at her. He bears his part. You bear yours. The final investigation conclusions were announced 3 days later. Imani Vance, for forging safety records, illegally using faulty equipment, intellectual property infringement, and interfering with an accident investigation, was removed as head of the center, had her medical license suspended, and was handed over to the relevant authorities for further investigation. The IT staff member who assisted in deleting data and the deputy team leader who participated in unifying statements were disciplined accordingly. Jamal, for initially concealing the truth, received an internal reprimand, but was not pursued for more serious charges due to his proactive provision of evidence and cooperation with the investigation. Jabari Thorne, for illegally approving a high-risk operation, interfering with accident information reporting, and making a critical error in on-site rescue, was demoted and subjected to further disciplinary review. My suspension was revoked, and the forged authorization agreement was declared void. The Research Institute publicly corrected all author lists and apologized to me. The project was allowed to continue, but an independent safety committee had to be established, and no single individual would have the authority to unilaterally modify risk levels. The 2 support staff members who died that day were officially recognized as victims of a wrongful decision, and their families received compensation and a public explanation. After the press conference, a reporter chased after me. Miss Clark, you've successfully cleared your name. Do you feel like you've won? I stopped. People lost their lives. I have also permanently lost part of my hearing and hand function. This isn't a victory. It's just that mistakes are finally no longer hiding behind the so-called greater good. The reporter asked again, Do you hate Jabari Thorne? I thought for a moment. No. Hating someone requires keeping them in your heart. I don't need to anymore. That day, the evidence room returned the wedding ring to me. The back of the clear bag had the original registration tag stuck to it. Presumed deceased, Zora Clark. Personal effects. I tore off the tag and didn't take the ring home. Jabari's final disciplinary result was announced as winter set in. He was demoted, reassigned, and removed from all frontline command positions. Imani entered the next phase of legal proceedings. She didn't have the intent to cause the explosion, but she had engaged in concealment and forgery regarding major risks. The center removed all of her research achievements, and many of her papers had to undergo academic review. The name she once cared about most was erased, page by page, from the project's history. Once, she sent me a letter through her representative. It was over 10 pages long. She wrote about growing up in her brother's shadow. After Damien's sacrifice, everyone sympathized with her, but they also forever saw her as the hero's little sister. She wanted to prove she didn't rely on her brother, which was why she needed the center, needed the achievements, needed a position dazzling enough. She believed I already had talent, a marriage, and Jabari's support. Missing a name from an author list wouldn't cost me anything, but she had nothing. At the end of the letter, she asked me, "If you were me, would you have seized the only chance you had?" I didn't reply. People can have ambitions, can fear loss, can yearn to prove themselves. But those are not reasons to push others into danger. What she truly lacked was never an opportunity. It was the courage to bear failure. Jabari came to the Research Institute to find me on the day the project was restarted. He stood outside the glass door, not in uniform. An old wound on his left shoulder made his posture a little stiff. I had my assistant let him in. The lab had a new door access system. Any data modification now required three-party confirmation: technical, safety, and medical. On the screen, the results of the first simulation test were running. Jabari watched for a long time. "You rebuilt the system." "Not rebuilt, repaired." "Changed the name too?" "The old system was called Companion. I named it in our second year of marriage. The new system is called Echo. Every operation leaves an indelible record. Human voices can be drowned out, data cannot." Jabari placed a paper bag on the table. Inside were the last few books of mine left at the Thorn House, and an old photo album. I didn't open it. "How's your father?" "The rehabilitation facility is taking good care of him." "That's good. He still asks about you." I was silent for a moment. "When his condition stabilizes, I can visit once. Not as the Thorn family's daughter-in-law, just as someone who once took care of him." Jabari nodded. He had learned not to keep asking questions he shouldn't. But before he left, he still paused. "Zora, the day Damien died, I promised I would take care of Imani. I always thought breaking a promise was more terrifying than making a mistake." I closed the file. "So, to keep one promise, you repeatedly broke another." His eyes reddened. "I know. You didn't lose to Imani nor to that explosion. You were just used to putting the person who would resist the least in the last place." Jabari's lips moved. "Not anymore. That's your life from now on. It has nothing to do with me." He looked at me. "You really can't accept me again?" I didn't avoid his gaze. "When I was dying, you didn't choose me. When I started to defend myself, you used your power to suppress me. Only after the truth came out did you stand by my side. That shows you're not completely without a conscience. But a marriage doesn't need a conscience that appears only after all the evidence is in. It needs the willingness to listen to me seriously, before the danger even happens." Jabari lowered his head. "I'm sorry. I accept your apology." He looked up abruptly. I continued. "Accepting doesn't mean getting back together. It just means I don't want to live with your mistakes anymore." The faint light in his eyes slowly died out. But this time, he didn't linger. At the door, he asked, "Where's the ring?" "I had it melted down." His footsteps stopped. "You melted it?" "The case is over. It's no longer evidence. There was no point in keeping it." Jabari stood there for a few seconds, then finally pushed the door open and left. I didn't tell him the ring wasn't discarded. I had the charred metal melted down and made into 3 small authentication chips. One was placed in the new system's server. One was given to the Independent Safety Committee. The last one was placed in the field medical kit. It no longer proves who loved whom. It is only responsible for ensuring that no one can single-handedly erase the truth. That afternoon, the new project had its first simulation drill. The system suddenly issued a red alert. Someone looked at their watch and whispered, "It might be a false sensor alarm. The tour group is about to arrive. Should we continue?" The entire lab fell silent. I walked to the control panel. "Halt the drill, recheck." The staff immediately complied. No one used a schedule to override a risk anymore. 20 minutes later, they found a small tear in a connection cable. If the test had continued, the equipment could have overheated. The problem wasn't huge, not even considered an accident. But looking at the torn cable, I suddenly remembered the dust falling on my face in the minefield. Many disasters, before they happen, are just a small problem that seems not worth stopping for. What truly protects people is never absolute correctness. It is that when an abnormality is discovered, someone allows you to say, "Stop. A year later, I returned to the mountain where the accident occurred. The old minefield had been cleared a second time. The original survey path was permanently closed. At the entrance stood two black memorial tablets, engraved with the names of the two support staff who had died. I placed a small bouquet of white flowers before the tablets. Keisha stood beside me. She had since left the original medical team and joined an independent trauma rescue training center. Jamal came too. He had passed his technical re-examination and was now in charge of safety verification for new model detectors. No one became a hero for speaking the truth. We just returned to our own positions, doing the work that needed to be done. The new monitoring system was being trialed in 6 rescue units. All basic functions were permanently open source. Research and commercial use were charged by license. With the first stream of income, I established a fund to provide psychological and legal support for accident rescue personnel. Not to commemorate a marriage, nor to take revenge on anyone. I just didn't want the next Keisha, when questioning a wrong order, to have to bear the pressure alone. After the ceremony, an officer came to find me. "Miss Clark, the field test is ready." My left hand still couldn't perform precise soldering operations. When the weather turned cold, my fingertips would go numb. My left ear's hearing had mostly recovered, but I needed a small hearing aid. These injuries would not disappear just because the guilty were punished. Nor did I suddenly become all-powerful. The rehabilitation, lawsuits, and rebuilding of the team had consumed almost all my savings. In the most difficult months, I counted every penny for rent and medical bills. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night from the pain, stare at the ceiling and think, would life have been easier if I hadn't pursued it? The answer was yes. As long as I restored the license, returned to the Thorn House, and continued to be the all-understanding Zora Clark, I could have suffered much less. But easy doesn't mean it's worth it. Before the test began, every staff member had to reconfirm their emergency contact. The form was passed to me. The name field was pre-printed. Zora Clark, marital status, divorced. For emergency contact, I filled in Sterling Hayes. Second contact, Keisha. The officer asked, "Do you need to fill in a family member?" "They are family." After filling out the form, I put on my helmet and walked into the test area. The new device emitted steady beeps. Jamal reported, "North side clear of anomalies." Keisha checked the medical kit. The authentication chip melted from the wedding ring was locked in a transparent compartment. Sunlight glinted off the metal surface. No engraving, no decoration, just a very ordinary safety component. In the evening, after the test, I received a text from an unknown number. "Today is the first anniversary of the accident. Are you okay?" No signature. I knew who it was. After leaving his old post, Jabari rarely appeared in public news. I heard he had volunteered for grassroots safety training courses, relearning risk assessment. Eleanor would occasionally send me videos of his father's recovery. We were no longer family, but we hadn't become enemies either. Some relationships don't need to be restored. It's enough to stop at a place where you no longer hurt each other. I didn't reply to the text, nor did I delete it. I just put the phone in my pocket and walked down the mountain with my team members. At the foot of the mountain was a newly opened barbecue joint. Keisha ordered 3 pulled pork sandwiches, specifically telling the server no coleslaw. He still remembered I didn't eat it. Jamal sat opposite me, excitedly talking about his improvement plans for the new detector. Halfway through, he suddenly stopped. "Miss Clark, am I talking too much shop?" "Keep going. I'm listening." Outside the window, a truck carrying equipment drove by. The glass pane vibrated slightly. A year ago, a similar vibration would have sent me into a cold sweat. Now, I just held my water glass tightly, waiting for the tension in my body to slowly dissipate. The food arrived. Keisha picked out the best piece of brisket and put it on my plate. "You're too thin. Eat more." I laughed. "Aren't you a medic? When did you switch to being a nutritionist?" "Ever since you started drinking coffee for breakfast." Jamal immediately tattled. "She didn't eat breakfast yesterday again." "Keisha," I said. "Miss Clark, I'm just respecting safety protocols. When a problem is found, it must be reported," he shot back. All 3 of us laughed. It was a very ordinary laugh. No declaration of victory, no one kneeling before me in tears, and no more perfect person appearing to replace Jabari's position. After finishing the meal, I returned alone to my new rented apartment. It wasn't large, but it had a south-facing window. By the window sat the philodendron I had brought from the Thorn House. After the explosion, it had withered by half. I cut off the rotten roots and changed the soil twice. Now, new shoots were climbing up the second shelf of the bookcase. On the desk were the blueprints for the next phase of testing. I turned on the desk lamp, put on my hearing aid, and slowly moved my left hand. Outside the window, someone was walking a dog. The bell of the convenience store downstairs rang twice. In the pot, soup for one was simmering. The phone sat quietly in the corner of the desk. There were no calls that had to be answered immediately, no one waiting for me to clean up a mess. At 11 p.m., the system sent the final test report of the day. All risk modification records were complete. All operator identities were clear. No abnormal deletions. I confirmed and shut down the computer. When I went to the window to water the philodendron, a new leaf was stretching out from beside an old scar. I reached out and touched it. The leaf was thin, but it already had its own direction.